China is highly risk-averse. Their main goal? Stay entirely out of the Middle East conflict and, most importantly, avoid a return to those crippling 145% tariffs of the past. So both nations absolutely want to dodge a massive trade war, but that Middle East conflict? Yeah, it's the undeniable elephant in the room.
Which brings us to part 2, the choke point at Hormuz. To really understand the stakes, you have to look at this number, an astonishing 20%. 20% of the entire world's crude oil flowed through this single narrow waterway before the war kicked off. It's one of the absolute most vital energy arteries on the planet. And right now, the strait is essentially closed to normal traffic because of the conflict and military blockades. That means a massive chunk of global energy has just been yanked right off the board, and it's sending massive shockwaves through the markets. And we're all feeling the ripple effects of this closure. It's squeezing the bunker fuel supply for the international shipping industry, which basically makes moving goods incredibly expensive and difficult. But it's also hitting regular wallets. In the US alone, this blockade has fueled a 3.8% surge in inflation, mostly driven by skyrocketing gas prices. Washington's argument here is that this blockade actually hurts China and its Pacific neighbors even more, making it super urgent for Beijing to step in and help resolve it.
Moving on to part 3, sanctions and defiance. Now, if you want to know where China's true leverage lies, look no further than this staggering fact. An overwhelming 90% of Iran's oil sales go straight to Chinese buyers. 90%! Beijing literally holds Tehran's economic lifeline. That gives China unparalleled influence over Iran. I mean, if they actually choose to use it. Obviously, the US is pretty frustrated by this deep entanglement, so aiming to cut off Tehran's resources, the US State and Treasury departments have come down hard with sanctions against China-based firms. We're talking penalties for oil refineries buying Iranian crude, and they've even targeted Chinese satellite imaging firms that are accused of providing the sensitive data used for Iranian military strikes against US forces. The US is basically weaponizing its financial system to drive a wedge right between Chinese businesses and Iran. But Beijing didn't just back down. In a totally unprecedented act of defiance, they instructed their companies to just completely ignore the US penalties. How? By dusting off a previously dormant 2021 blocking statute. This is essentially a massive legal shield that explicitly forbids Chinese entities from recognizing or complying with foreign sanctions. It's a very clear signal. They are not going to be bullied by Washington into cutting ties with Iran. So instead of openly taking sides or joining the US pressure campaign, China is playing a much more subtle game. It's all about quiet diplomacy. Literally, right before the summit, China hosted Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi in Beijing. They've also been publicly defending Iran's right to civilian nuclear energy. But maybe the most crucial move here? They are heavily pushing their ally, Pakistan, to act as the primary peacemaker. They want to orchestrate an end to this crisis from behind the scenes, totally avoiding a direct clash with the US military. And that brings us to part 4, a fragile ceasefire. When you map out the ceasefire timeline, you can see just how rapidly the whole process stalled out. On April 8th, thanks to that behind-the-scenes push from China, Pakistan actually managed to broker a 2-week pause. This even led to high-level talks in Islamabad on April 11th and 12th. But neither side would give an inch. And by mid-May, the process completely flatlined when President Trump formally rejected Tehran's latest negotiated offer. In fact, saying he rejected it might be putting it mildly. The negotiation process was put on massive life support when the president used some incredibly blunt language. He literally called the Iranian proposal a piece of garbage, telling reporters in the Oval Office that he didn't even bother finishing reading it. That kind of stark language really drives home just how massively far apart these two sides are when it comes to any terms for permanent peace. So, what was in this rejected proposal? Well, it came down to 3 non-negotiable Iranian demands. First, Iran wanted the US naval blockade lifted. Second, they demanded immediate relief from economic sanctions. And third, crucially, they insisted on keeping a degree of control over the traffic flowing through the Strait of Hormuz. Naturally, the US completely rejected these terms, meaning those vital shipping lanes are still shut down, and the standoff just drags on. With diplomacy hitting a brick wall, both sides are now digging in militarily. Washington is actively looking into reviving plans to use its naval power to literally escort commercial vessels through the Strait of Hormuz. Meanwhile, Tehran is completely refusing to loosen its grip on that choke point. It's a highly combustible standoff, and honestly, one wrong move by either side could easily spark right back into active warfare. Which leaves us with the ultimate question as we wrap up this explainer. Are the massive economic stakes at this Beijing summit going to be enough to finally force a resolution? Will the shared desire of Donald Trump and Xi Jinping to avoid a catastrophic trade war actually be the thing that untangles this devastating blockade in the Middle East? Or is the global economy just going to keep bearing the cost of this massive geopolitical stalemate? It's a totally precarious situation, and how these two leaders play their cards here is going to shape the global economy for years. So what do you think will break first, the blockade or the global supply chain?